One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We've got a great show today. We've got Shireen Jaffer, the founder and CEO of a company called Edvo. Edvo is really interesting because it's a talent business that flips the script. And so Edvo represents candidates as they look for jobs, almost like a talent agency. So it's really, really interesting. And we dive deep into the business and we talk a lot about sort of the state of the talent market and what candidates need to do to find the right job, and also what companies need to do. Now, we want to thank our sponsors, of course. The first is Conga. Conga is the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite. With Conga, you can simplify documents, automate contracts, and execute e-signature. Also, you can focus on accelerating sales cycles and closing business faster. So go to go.conga.com/saleshacker for more information. Our second sponsor, as you know, is Outreach. Outreach is the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale. From automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best, Outreach has your back. Thanks to everybody that's writing in and supporting the Sales Hacker Podcast. We're going to get to you, and thanks in future episodes. But for now, I want to dive right into the interview with Shireen Jaffer, the founder and CEO of Edvo. So take a listen. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome back to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We've got a great show for you today. We've got Shireen Jaffer on the show. Shireen's the co-founder and CEO of Edvo, which is a job search platform that makes it easier for people to identify careers on the upswing, learn how close they are to being the ideal hire, and get the support they need to land the best job. Edvo focuses on entry to mid-level sales, customer success, and marketing roles. Now, her entrepreneurial journey began while studying at the University of Southern California, where she founded Skillify at 19 years old. There, she scaled career readiness programs across 220 schools and bootstrapped the company to profitability. Her work gave her insight into the recruiting industry, revealing how one-sided it was and how it negatively affected both recruiters and candidates. So today, Shireen works hard to bring balance back to the system with her team at Edvo. Shireen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here.
We're excited to have you. So we know your name, Shireen Jaffer, and I gave a little bit of a background, but why don't you tell us what is Edvo, and just give us a little bit of an overview of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we go into Edvo, it's important to hear the inspiration behind it. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background and how we got to where Edvo is today. So I started my career in internal recruiting at Northwestern Mutual in downtown Los Angeles. And I was responsible for our entry-level reps and our internship program. A lot of them were coming from great schools like USC, UCLA, Stanford. And I recognized that after we hired them, a lot of my time was spent just on-ramping them and teaching them basic skills like how to handle your first job and how to deal with your boss for the first time and how to work with colleagues and deal with conflict. A lot of things that schools probably should have taught them. And that's when, after spending about 2 years at Northwestern, building their learning and development program, coaching our interns, becoming the top internship program recognized by Vault and across our network offices, I pivoted and started my last company, Skillify. And the motivation behind Skillify was, again, school students are spending so much time in school. It should help them explore their interests, validate their interests. So regardless of what major they're pursuing, they have the real world exposure already to really feel confident in the careers that they're about to embark on. So at Skillify, we implemented curriculum on career readiness across 220 schools, like you mentioned. It was a lot of fun. We impacted 36,000 students. And then my students were graduating and looking for their first and second full-time jobs. And Sam, they had everything that they're told to have when looking for a job. They had that incredible resume. They had warm referrals into companies. They weren't just applying online. They were networking. They had the internships. And they kept coming back to us and saying, Shireen, this job search process is still a nightmare. What the heck is going on? I have no idea what else I can do now to put myself out there. I'm getting offers from companies that I don't necessarily see myself being at long term, and I don't want to get stuck in this vicious cycle of joining a company for a year and then moving on. That is the inspiration behind Edvo. We took a hard look at this recruiting industry about a year ago when we started, and we recognized that all of the solutions in the recruiting space for so long have been for companies and helping companies fill roles. And it's never really been about helping people get jobs. And one of the stats that we found that really was the icing on the cake and made us commit to Edvo, there was no other answer, was the fact that today on average, it takes 36 days for a company to fill that entry and mid-level role. But for that person to get that same entry and mid-level job, they are on average on the job search for 6 months. So for Edvo, we said, hey, we want to bridge that gap and really create this candidate-centric recruiting solution where we're their talent agent. So just like an athlete has an agent that represents her or him and is incentivized to find them the right opportunities where they'll do their best work, at Edvo, we get to understand our candidates on a deep level, understand how they work, understand where they'll thrive, understand what their lifestyle requirements are so that we can navigate them to opportunities in our network where they can truly be set up for success. That's Edvo.
Okay. So do people hire you? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of our core pieces that we recognized when we first started Edvo, we fell into this trap that a lot of recruiting solutions fall into is we monetize on the company side, right? It's of course easy to, companies have this pain, they need to hire. They're used to paying for recruiting solutions. They're used to paying for external staffing agencies. But then the company becomes your customer. And I think that is why, again, today that discrepancy between the 36 days and 6 months exists is because everyone serves the company. So at Edvo, we're completely free to companies. And instead, candidates pay us to give them an incredible job search experience that helps them find the jobs that fit them. So on the flip side, because we're free to companies, our companies are giving our candidates the best candidate experience because they know in order to work with Edvo and get these high quality candidates for free, they just have to give us their partnership and make sure that they're not ghosting our candidates, that they're maintaining consistent communication with us. They're helping us learn feedback from them so that we can ultimately get them the best candidates throughout their hiring needs. And then on the flip side with our candidates, if they work with us and we get them a job in our network that they accept and are with that company for at least 30 days, candidates contribute 5% of their base annual salary to Edvo. Now, if we help them and, supported them through their job search and they ended up getting a job outside of our network, cool, more power to them. We're happy that we could help, but they owe us nothing at that point.
They owe you 5% forever or just for the first year?
Just for the first year.
Okay, that's interesting. So this seems to be predicated on you having a great pool of candidates, doing some kind of curation or vetting of the candidates themselves. So how do you do that? How do you go out and find the candidates, and how do you make sure that the people that Edvo is representing are great people?
Yeah, that's a great question and so important to us. So there's 2 parts to that. One, how do we find the candidates? So we have 5 major sources that we get our candidates from. 1, job boards. Very typical. We're on all of the major job boards like every other external staffing solution. So all staffing agencies advertise today on job boards. We make it very clear that our job postings are for companies in our network. We don't release the company names, obviously. But if you're interested, you want to work for Edvo, this is how we work. We're happy to help you find opportunities like the one we posted. So that's one source. The second source, which is the most exciting for us, are community partnerships. So think about the best Slack communities, Facebook groups that are full of incredibly invested people that care about their jobs, they care about their industry, they care about their role. And so we're building partnerships with those groups so that when they're on the job search, they use Edvo as their first stop. Now, a lot of the candidates we work with, they have no problem getting job offers, but they understand the opportunity cost of 1, job searching, and 2, taking an offer that's just the wrong fit. Oftentimes they'll take an offer and then once you're in the role, you realize, oh man, this is absolutely not what I thought it was going to be. So they understand that. So a lot of these communities have high quality candidates that are either passively looking, not really actively looking, but they're always open to new opportunities. And they use Edvo as their first stop. Third, we have publisher partnerships. So we love to partner with some of the best blogs out there, podcasts. The listeners of that content are, of course, high quality candidates as well. They care about their industry. They care about their role. So we hope that they understand that Edvo is out there to essentially help them make that job search experience a lot quicker. And then lastly, we have university partnerships. Because we do entry to mid-level roles, some of our best candidates also are from the alumni programs or soon to be graduates or recent grads with graduation right around the corner. So that's where we're finding our candidates, to answer your question number one. Now, second, how do we make sure those candidates are actually high quality? That is so fun for me to talk about. When we started Edvo, anytime we launch a new role, so for example, my SDRs, before I started helping or supporting SDR candidates, I went and talked to, or not me, but Edvo, all of us, we all went and talked to top performing sales development reps, their managers, SMB account executives, because they were typically SDRs right before. And we talked about what are the scenarios you face in the field that are most common. So of course, for my SDRs, it's the cold calling, it's the prospecting processes, it's dealing with rejection, it's creating email copies and trying to figure out what works for their audience. It's working with the marketing teams and making sure they have good personalized content that they can leverage, right? So we created those scenarios, and then we had the top performers actually go through 10 to 12 free response scenario and situational questions. So for example, one of the questions we have is, you have to make 50 cold calls today and send 50 emails. What do you do? And based on the data we've now collected from these top performers, we've created this quote unquote scoring rubric. And when candidates come through the Edvo platform, which is chat based, they answer these 10 to 12 free response questions. So there's no gaming it, there's no multiple choices, there's no leading questions. They just say what they believe is the right answer, what they would do in that situation. And if a candidate tells me, hey, that's a lot, I'm going to get up early, I'm going to get my cup of coffee, I'm going to get on my computer, I'm going to hit it. That's not the wrong answer. It's just not a good answer. But that shows us, hey, this person's willing to get up early and do it. Maybe they're, more fit for an entry level SDR role where the company also has great training programs. They can train them up. And as long as this candidate has the transferable soft skills, they could be a good SDR.
Why is that a bad answer?
Because to really be a strong SDR, what we found is a candidate that tells us, hey, the reality of this is 50 cold calls and 50 emails. There needs to be a strategy behind it. It's not just a smile and dial. So I need to make sure I have my targeted account list. I need to make sure that based on my clientele, I know what are the right times to send out emails versus what are the right time to make those cold calls. I need to make sure I'm leveraging outreach and I have my email sequences ready. I want to make sure I've got my marketing team sending me good content for my follow-ups, right? And a lot of our great SDR candidates actually break down their prospecting process, their targeting processes. And again, when we're comparing them to the data we've collected from these top performers, we're able to tell them, hey, based on the market demands today, this is how great of a fit you are for this SDR role. And that is the same type of information we give to our employer partners. And they get all of it verbatim on what the candidate said, so they can understand where this SDR is at or where this SMB account executive is at.
Do you promise the SDRs or the people that you're representing that you will get them more money than they would get otherwise?
So typically by working with us, one of the inherent services that Edvo provides is pre-negotiating compensation. And the way that works is, because we have such a deep relationship with our employer partners, we know what their range is. We know their minimum, their ideal, and of course the maximum they're willing to go. We also have historical data on what candidates have made at those companies. So on the flip side, when a candidate comes in and they have a minimum and a maximum, I'm able to help them based on where they're at, how well they fit the role, what I know about the company, tell them, hey, actually, you kind of fall into this more minimum range, or hey, you can actually command this maximum range. So we try to be as honest and strategic as possible on both sides because we want to create a win-win. But absolutely what we've seen is candidates, by working with Edvo, just because most of them don't know how to negotiate or just don't have transparency into salaries, they end up making at least 10% more by just working through Edvo.
Interesting. And if you're charging 5%, and let's say a high-end base salary for an SDR, would I be right in saying it's around $50,000?
Absolutely.
So that's $2,500 spread. And do they pay it all in one lump sum, or they pay it kind of every paycheck?
Yeah, so it's a hybrid of both, right? So we have it split across 3 payments. You can have it on your credit card, your debit card. We're not trying to mess with your paycheck or your bank account details. So you can just pre-authorize it. We don't collect a lump sum. It's across 3 payments 30 days after you start with the company. So 30 days later, the first third of the payment is charged. 60 days later, the second third. 90 days later, the third.
Interesting. And so you're at 2,500 per candidate, obviously much less than a traditional recruiting service. You're going to need to work with a very large number of people in order to build a big business. Unless, are there other revenue streams? Or tell us about like how you're planning on scaling up Edvo as you become more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've recognized quite a few opportunities. One being, we've got all of these incredible educational institutions coming out, these coding boot camps, e-learning, these sales boot camps. And they're doing such a good job delivering relevant curriculum, which unfortunately our traditional schools aren't doing the best job of right now. And that relevant curriculum is helping these students upskill and, be ready for these SDR level roles. But what I see a lot of our learning programs and these newer companies struggling with is actually facilitating those job outcomes. And so as we're talking to more of these learning institutions, understanding where they're investing, what their operational layers look like, we're seeing this opportunity of essentially being an outcomes engine for a lot of these learning partners. So once their students are ready, they get introduced to Edvo. We can facilitate a job outcome, ideally within, the average right now is 6 months, like worldwide. For us, it's ideally within the first month, we facilitate a job outcome, but we want to do it no more than 90 days.
A job outcome is a job offer?
Correct.
Like at least one job? Okay, got it.
Yeah, I actually want to go a step forward and say it's not just a job offer, but it's a job acceptance, right? Because it's not going to be good if our candidates are getting offers, but they don't want to accept them. So for us, an outcome is a candidate actually accepts that job offer.
Cool. That's cool. How did you... I guess, we've got people out there listening that are working in a lot of different jobs that are wondering about starting their own business. How did you figure out or decide that you wanted to be a founder? Was there a series of questions that you answered for yourself? Was it just you were young and sort of the opportunity cost at that point in your life was low? How did you come to the determination to be a CEO?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's definitely an opportunity cost analysis that I did. So, I started Skillify when I was 19 and I was still a full-time student at USC and I was still working at Northwestern Mutual. So I was a little insane, which you have to be. So I really looked when I graduated SC, I had a choice. I could either accept a job offer that I had on the table that was, that would allow me to be comfortable, or I could do Skillify. And my parents are not business owners. I don't have any business owners in my family. They're very structured. My mom's a nurse. My dad has worked in purchasing at a hospital. My brother's a doctor. So when I told them I want to go full time with Skillify, of course they were concerned and they wanted me to, feel good and feel comfortable and have structure and grow and learn. And I didn't necessarily have their encouragement, although I did have their support. So the opportunity cost analysis I did, Sam, was I looked at the job offer I had from the full-time role and I looked at the salary and I said, hey, in my first year at Skillify, if I don't match or exceed this salary profit-wise, I will think about other things. I'm giving myself 1 year to make the same amount of profit that I would if I were to take this job offer. And that made sense to me at that time. And fortunately, I worked really hard and it worked out. And we did exceed that, our revenue and our profit did exceed what I was going to make as a salary. And it was just me and one other person. So that is all of the analysis I did to say, hey, I want to do Skillify. But up until that point, I think for me, it was, I cared deeply about certain pain points that I see in our world. And if I can't, when I was going through and learning about the industry, I couldn't necessarily find organizations that were doing work that I also resonated with in a very deep fashion. So when I was doing Skillify, my heart, my soul, I was learning so much. It made so much sense for my career that opportunity cost analysis was really the only thing that I needed to prove to give myself that peace of mind of, okay, I'm going in and I'm doing this as a co-founder and CEO and I'm moving forward.
Do you have an engineering degree? Are you a coder?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. At Skillify, I was a solo founder and I bootstrapped it. And Daniel, who is now my CTO at Edvo, he actually was my technical advisor at Skillify. So he helped us automate a lot of the coaching work we did and build out the right type of technology foundations that we needed. But Absolutely not. I am not an engineering degree. I have a degree in business with an emphasis in entrepreneurship, specifically social entrepreneurship.
Wow. And what's been the biggest, I mean, I'm sure there's been many, many challenges, but when you think back and reflect on the last couple of years, the biggest challenge that you've overcome, the biggest obstacle that you've overcome, whether it's, internal or external?
I think it's about maintaining a balance between growth and operations and making sure your company can sustain that growth. So I think we're in a space where the atmosphere, the funding atmosphere is also changing. I think people are, now giving more emphasis to ability to make money and have some profit and the revenues and growth. And so I see a lot of companies, and we fell in this trap where it was just about go, go, go. We're off to the races, make money, get this product out, and just try to find all the revenue streams and then come back and fix all of the operation layers later. And I think I believe there needs to be a sensitive balance between the two, because I've seen a lot of companies, a lot of founders that I've spoken to, that at a point now 2 years in where they're doing really well revenue wise, but they're missing a lot of key data tracking, operations. They don't have a good understanding of where their team is at and who they really even need for that company to get to the next level. So I think one of the challenges early on is just, when you're so young and you have to make money, you've got to, one, prove that your product works and there's a market and they're willing to pay for your product, but then two, also pay the bills and make sure you can hire the right people and grow. There needs to be a sensitive balance between that type of mindset and, hey, okay, but I also need to make sure my group can sustain it, or my team can sustain itself, and my business can sustain itself, and my product can be built in the right ways. So there's not this moment where we just plateau or crash and burn, for lack of words. So that's what I would say is one of the biggest lessons I've learned or challenges we've overcome.
That's I think that resonates with me, at least. So I think that's a great lesson. So first of all, thank you for that background and for sharing that. You're working in an organization, in a company that is built around the hiring market and built around, matching great candidates to great companies. What's your take on, the current economy, the fact that unemployment's at an all-time low? Are we headed for, I guess the question is, if I'm coming out of undergrad, or I'm just, I didn't go to undergrad, but I'm a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old youngster looking to make my way in the world of sales, customer success, et cetera, or marketing. How should I be thinking about managing my career in the current economic environment and the current job climate? And what sort of lessons or pieces of advice do you give people as they come into their first job?
Absolutely. So, loaded question. Something I talk about
Indeed.
a lot. So first of all, where do I see the market today? So with the unemployment being so low, one of the things that we've recognized is it's not low because people love their jobs and everyone is thriving and everyone's getting paid what they should get paid and everyone's, helping their companies grow. That's not why unemployment is low. A lot of what we're seeing from the conversations we're having, the data we've looked into, is people at this point are settling for jobs. More than 80% are open to new opportunities. 6 million people switch jobs every single month in the US. So there's a lot of bouncing happening. There's a lot of settling happening. And a lot of people right now in their roles are not necessarily happy with where they are. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be compensation related. It could be growth related. It could be fit related. They're in a role that, they had to take because it was an offer they got, but it's not necessarily something they love.
How much preparation, one part of me wants to say, is some part of all this bouncing around some mismatch between people's narrative about themselves and sort of what their expectation of what work is versus the reality of what work is? Because, you hear people talk about find your passion and do what you love. And first of all, most young people, or at least when I was young, I didn't know what my passion was.
Yep.
And I didn't know what I loved. And I kind of misidentified being passionate about something like movies and work, and saying, well, if I love movies, I need to work in the film industry, which isn't quite the same thing because I didn't really have any skills to contribute at that point to the film industry. Do you think that do you think there's some education that's required to tell people what is the reality of the work that they should expect so that they're not, disillusioned within the first 6 months, for example?
Absolutely. And I think it's a miscommunication between companies and people. So people don't necessarily know. So going back to like the first comment you had made, right? Is it about people articulating their skill set in a way where they might be a good fit for the job, or they think they're a good fit for the job, but once they get in there, it's not true. I think it's kind of on both sides, where they look at it, the candidates look at a job description because that's really all there is today to learn about what a company does, unless they're networking in and talking to people in the role today and really getting a deep understanding of what the role is actually about. The majority of people have just the job description. So they use that. And then the companies are using this one-page resume to understand if this person has these skills and behaviors that they want. And then they're using this interview process between a person and a person that's, of course, full of lots of bias and whatnot, to get out information if this person will truly be a good fit in the role. So I think there's a communication problem where we need to do a better job of really understanding internally what are the skills and behaviors and attributes that make someone successful in this role. And I often see companies coming to me and saying, okay, well, I need 2 years of sales experience in SaaS, consultative sales for sure. And I need that bachelor's degree, which of course now is being less emphasized, thankfully. But then I also need someone who's absolutely used Salesforce and HubSpot and blah, 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 right? And there's all these requirements. And then I have candidates who have some of those requirements and they feel like if it was just the resume that they were basing off of, they would feel like, oh, if this candidate doesn't match all of my checklists, that's not even worth an interview. Because of course, a recruiter's time is already spent on doing so many resume screens, they don't even have to have that conversation. On the flip side with the candidate, they have no idea what the companies are truly valuing and how to truly articulate their skill set. So all they know is I've got this job description in my interview. If I get one, I have to go down this responsibility list and make sure I hit all of the duties that they've said we will need to do in this role. And then they get into that job and they recognize, oh, wow, especially at an early stage startup, things are changing all the time. So those duties sometimes change almost every 3 months. And there's a lot of, unless you have the soft skills of being able to adapt to change and being able to just push forward and problem solve and critically think and have a good balance between working autonomously but then also have this collaborative, these are really hard behaviors to gauge for just off of a resume. So I think that's where a lot of this misfit and jumping around is happening, is there's just a lack of communication on both sides. It's not just the candidate not being able to truly articulate, what they bring to the table.
What do you think about this statement, which is that I understand that there's people out there that love being an SDR, but I think that the reality is that even with amazing, amazing tools, the best tools like Outreach, our sponsor who we love you, Outreach, but even with tools like Outreach, it can be a tough job. It's a tough job. I am a career salesperson. I can tell you it's a tough job. You're doing a lot of work. It's very repetitive. You're hearing no a tremendous amount of time. You don't get to participate in the sales process. You're just doing the first part of it, which is trying to get meetings. You get 20 meetings set in June, time to do it again in July.
Right.
So how prepared do you think people are just for that reality that, listen, whether or not it's a good fit, it's going to be a grind, and it's a grind because it's on the way to bigger and better things down the road, but you have to be, do you think people are prepared for that reality?
Yeah, I would. So 2 things there. 1, are people prepared? And 2, how do you help even, and this was going back to the first question you had, is how do even people approach taking an SDR type role that is so repetitive and difficult, but then how do they think about their career, right, long term? So the first point, I think, especially with my with my candidates who are on the job search process for a long time, these candidates are applying to thousands of jobs, hundreds of jobs, and they're dealing with rejection all the time. I think when you're in school, you are doing a lot of repetitive work all the time. So I think it comes down to, is this someone who has this do what it takes attitude? Is this someone who doesn't just handle rejection, but goes deeper and understands why they're being rejected in the first place, so they can change up the email content a little bit here and there, depending on, what the data says. They can change up their pitch on that voicemail. So I think people are, if they understand the reality of it, so that goes back to the communication piece. If they understand that it's not just about making 100 cold calls a day, I think that's what job descriptions say and why people get so scared is I'm going to sit here, I'm just going to make 100 cold calls a day. It's, hey, you're making 100 cold calls a day because the reality is a lot of people's businesses are doing their job. And so they're not just sitting there answering every single phone call. So your actual pickup ratio and your, conversion there is going to be a lot lower, and that leads to you making those phone calls. And if you're not getting a good response, these are the metrics that our SDRs today see. And if you're not hitting these metrics, well, there's opportunities for you to maybe make your pitch better. So if companies start really detailing what the SDR role really is, it's not just 100 cold calls. It's more creative. It's more strategic. It's more collaborative. Get feedback from SDRs that are crushing it. I think people, and this is what we do at Edvo, and when we help people understand that and we relate it to the experience they've had, all of a sudden they're like, absolutely, I'll do that, especially, and going to your next question, especially if 18 months in an SDR role, hitting these metrics will help me then go into an account executive role or an account manager role. And they can see the bigger picture. They can see why that 18-month or 24-month or maybe 12-month grind is needed. So, for example, one of the partnerships team member I have at Edvo, he was actually an Edvo candidate. And he has years of sales experience, but it's because he's a 7-Eleven franchisee. At the age of 21, he started his first 7-Eleven, scaled it to over 7 7-Elevens. He has all this BD experience and management experience, but he understands he needs to get into technology sales for the health of his career. So he came through the Edvo experience, didn't do so hot on our account executive assessment, which is what he thought he was ready for. We gave him personalized feedback where his skill gaps were, pointed him to different content he can take. And 4 months later, he retook the assessment and did really well. And we got him into final interviews with 3 of our employer partners. And then the beauty of Edvo is we know what talent is really, really awesome. We ended up, hiring him ourselves. And he recognized that for his career, he right now is an SDR. He needs to put the work in, not just because you're just doing the grind to then one day deserve to be an account executive. That's not the reason. It's you need to put the work in. So you lay down your foundations. You learn how to use Salesforce. You learn how to use outreach. You learn how, people's sentiment are when you call them versus when you email them versus when you just show up. Those are just foundational things you need to learn to then crush it as an account executive. So I feel like as people out there, you're thinking about your careers and you're thinking about, what you need to build the lifestyle. That's how you need to think about it. What is the lifestyle you want? What is the ideal compensation you want to be making? What type of environment do you want to be working in? Identify what companies or roles or jobs fit within that lifestyle that's realistic, and then understand what skills you need to get there. So if Sam, for you, if you did that process and realized, oh man, I don't really have the skills to go into film, you have a decision there. You're either going to work your butt off to develop those skills, or you're going to look at the opportunity cost and see, okay, well, my strengths are actually in line with these other jobs. Are those jobs still going to let me live that lifestyle? Because that's what's most important to people these days. Then you'll realize, oh, you know what? Film could be a passion, but really my transferable skill set, my creative skill set will be better used in this career, which is way closer to my reach and still allows me to live that lifestyle.
Interesting. Good feedback. When we flip the equation and we focus on the companies versus the candidates, and companies are also, are primarily the victims of all of this transition of people staying in jobs, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and people. Well, I don't know if it's a problem. Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe, it's just the evolution of capitalism and, the gig economy and all of that. But if I am a company and I want to keep people past the point where I'm investing in them and they're ramping and I want them at full productivity and I want to retain the top talent, what do you recommend, or how do you advise companies to build a program that not just acquires great people, but keeps them around?
Absolutely. So I want to make 2 clarifications. One, I don't think companies are the primary victims of this problem, right? I think a candidate leaving 6 months, a company, yes, it costs them a ton of money for sure. I, as a hiring manager, have been a victim of this. But yes, it costs time and money for us as a business. But for that candidate to then have to leave after 6 months, if it's a bad fit, ignore any other consequence or reasons for them leaving. But if it's for the reason of a bad fit, they leave after 6 months. Guess what? If they're looking for other jobs, no recruiter wants to interview them necessarily, because being at a company for less than 2 years is a red flag in our industry. right? So they get stuck in this vicious cycle. And then second, a business, again, with their recruiting solutions, can still fill that role within 36 days. That candidate that just left after 6 months or a year will on average be on that job search for 6 months. So I do think this is a problem that impacts candidates, people more so than companies today. But to answer your question, I think with our companies, the best thing you can do to retain your top talent, it's one, understand what your top talent even looks like, right? What are the attributes, the behaviors, the skill sets? Two, when you're interviewing for that top talent or someone who can be, or someone who can grow into it, it needs to be a team-wide effort. It's not just up to the recruiter to identify that person and then the hiring manager to identify that person and then it's done. It needs to be a team-wide effort that's collaborative, because that will be good for both the company and the candidate. The candidate will also get a better idea of what it means to truly succeed in that company. So today, the process, for example, if you're hiring for sales, it typically is that initial recruiter screen. The recruiter either sees your resume or hears about you from an internal referral, whatever it may be. He or she gets on a phone call with you. It's typically 20 to 30 minutes. And the recruiter typically has a scorecard, and it's a scorecard that's half metrics oriented. So has this person done X amount of cold calls before? Has this person sold into SaaS before? Has this person dealt with inbound versus outbound, right? So there's those kind of like hard skills. And then it's softer skills of, has this person worked at a startup before or exhibit the soft skills needed to thrive in a more early stage startup environment, if that's the environment. And so she's or he is really checking off these boxes on the scorecard. And then lastly, because it's a sales role, the recruiter is also looking for, can this person just like sell themselves? Is the personality there? Are they aware of the product? Have they done their research? Because they're going to be in a role that requires all those skill sets. So the recruiter screen is there really to just understand, can I put this person in front of my hiring manager? And how will my hiring manager perceive this person? Because at the end of the day, internally, a recruiter is really, the hiring manager is the client of an internal recruiter, right? That's the relationship they have. So that's the recruiter screen. Then typically it goes into a behavioral interview before the recruiter passes this person off to the hiring manager. So that behavioral interview is typically like, hey, Charlotte, it's been great talking to you on this recruiter call. I think you could be a great fit for this role. But before I pass you off to my hiring manager, I would love to kind of give you an exercise. And that exercise for a sales role might be, leave a voicemail as if you had called a prospect. Of course, they didn't pick up. What would you say on that voicemail? Or, hey, show me a draft of a prospecting email that you would send, and what is your cadence for following up? So that's usually the behavioral interview part. And then if they do that well, then it goes to the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager typically asks the same exact questions that recruiter asked in that initial phone screen. So you can imagine how, unless a recruiter and hiring manager they have incredible communication and they're asking deeper questions and separate questions to really understand holistically if this candidate can be the right person, usually that communication doesn't exist. And so one, for the hiring manager, they're just asking the same exact questions. And two, for the candidate, they're answering the same exact questions. So the interview isn't that meaningful, and it doesn't allow you to have the opportunity to exchange newer information and go deeper to truly make sure this is a good fit. That's where I say one of the biggest things you can do as a recruiter in your organization, and again, coming from being an internal recruiter, is treat your hiring managers as if they were your clients. And there needs to be, anytime, a hiring manager says, hey, I need to hire 2 more SDRs, you need to have a launch call or an onboarding call with your hiring manager to really understand, okay, outside of the job description, what do you need in this SDR? What are the deal breakers? What are the non-negotiables? If the person has X, Y, and Z, but doesn't have ABC, is that a no-go? Really asking those questions so that you can have a wider net on the candidates that could be a great fit to your hiring manager. And
I have a question.
Yep.
So this is me being skeptical / cynical. Is there really a difference between what different companies need from an SDR? Aren't all the qualities essentially the same? We've had Mark Roberge on the show from HubSpot, and he's incredible. But he talked about the profile that they put together for HubSpot, and there was really nothing on there that every company doesn't need. Every company needs intellectual curiosity. Every company needs drive. Are there really differences, or maybe I'm wrong? Maybe there are differences, and I'm just naive.
Yeah, you pointed out something really good. You're talking about role-specific skill sets. Are there major differences of that? Absolutely not. But for an SDR to thrive at one company versus another company, it comes down to management styles. The hiring manager is typically going to manage that SDR. I have had SDRs that have gotten offers from comparable companies, same industry, pretty much competitors, and one company hired that SDR and one company didn't. The other company just didn't even think they were a good SDR, but it came down to the management style within that company would not have fit that SDR. That is the
Interesting.
difference. That is why the recruiter and the hiring manager and team-wide a communication needs to take place so that we can understand in this specific organization, what kind of SDR do we need to thrive?
Yeah, and that's where you also need to have the vocabulary to really describe
Mhm.
your culture accurately in a way that's neither where you're not just using kind of like value laden or judgment laden terms, where you're just trying to be direct
Exactly.
and honest about what is it actually like to work at this place. And maybe we swear a lot, or maybe we don't swear a lot, or maybe we're, I don't know, super direct or not super
Yeah.
direct. So
I think to my hiring managers out there and to my recruiters out there, honestly, ask yourself or ask each other, what are the common scenarios we face every single day? That's it. Just figure out the scenarios and I understand how do we face these scenarios and then use that to judge candidates. When we try to really do like the black and white, like, do we swear a lot? Do we not? What type of culture we have? And it's a yes or no question. It's very difficult because so much of that is self-reported data and it's not necessarily thoughtful versus when you actually point out what are the different scenarios we face every single day and what do we do in these scenarios and what type of person we want that will do something similar in these scenarios, that's going to help you really find the right culture fit.
I like it. Shireen, we're almost at the end of our time together. And so at this point, what we like to do is pay it forward a little bit and talk about influences, whether those are books or podcasts or people that have been really influential in your life that we want to give some credit to. So when you think about maybe it's books that you reread often that really have a profound influence on you, or people that have had a huge impact on you, what comes to mind?
So, one of the books, that's a good question. So, I recently read, and it's something that I plan on reading again and again that has had a huge influence on me and the way I think, is a book called Factfulness 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World. I promise it's not as cynical as it sounds. But
I don't mind cynicism.
It's a great read around what is truly happening in our world. What does the data truly say? And data can be skewed in all ways, right? So really understanding it in a deeper way so you can reframe your mindset or just be more aware of the biases and the misconceptions that we fall into every single day. So that is definitely a book I recommend everyone to read. It's a quick read and it's so, so good.
Factfulness, that's what it's called?
Factfulness by, I know the last name is Rosling, Hans Rosling. I think he started with his son and daughter-in-law. I think they three co-wrote it.
My friends and I on our group WhatsApp, we have a phrase, and that phrase is Googleable. So if you're out there in the world hearing the title Factfulness, I assure you that Google will tell you, will show you the way.
Yes.
Shireen, if we're out there listening and maybe we were really inspired and we want to be a candidate that Edvo represents, or maybe we want to work for Edvo, or we just want to reach out and get in touch with you, what's your preferred method of communication?
Email me. We're totally hiring internally. So reach out if you're excited about Edvo, or if you are an employer partner that wants Edvo candidates for free, reach out. And then lastly, if you need help finding a job, reach out. But email is best, Shireen@edvo.com. You can also go on my LinkedIn and reach out that way.
Awesome. Shireen, thanks so much for being on the Sales Hacker podcast. Congrats on launching Edvo. And we look forward to following your success and progress over the next couple months and years.
Thanks so much, Sam. I appreciate it.
Take care. Hey, everybody. It's Sam's Corner. Really interesting conversation with Shireen Jaffer, the founder and CEO of Edvo. And this is a new model that I think we may see more and more of. Edvo is an agent that represents you, the sales professional, and tries to get you a better deal, the right company, the right fit, in much the same way that sports agents represent athletes. And the model they've constructed is very innovative. They take 5% of your first year salary, but in exchange, hopefully they've helped you find a better job. She mentions that they help you get 10% more typically than the traditional candidate. So I think that there's something to this, particularly in a job market and an unemployment market where, there's historic lows in unemployment. Candidates really have a lot more leverage, and you have the ability and opportunity to have somebody represent you on your behalf in ways that other noteworthy and skilled professionals have across different industries. Now, she also talks about just sort of understanding what the work is going to be and really focusing on trying to match your temperament and what it's like to work at that company, and doing due diligence about what it's like to work at that company as you go through your job interview process and as you understand what it's going to be like to be an SDR. I also think it's really important to have realistic expectations. That's sort of the point I was making to her in this interview, which is, listen, it's still work. Right? So I know that everybody tells you follow your passion, follow your heart, but it's not all going to be, playing in the NBA and shooting threes with Steph Curry. It's going to be work. Some days it's going to suck. That's okay. What you need to do is you need to have a long-term perspective on your life and your career. You need to put in the work. And if you put in that work and you have a positive attitude and you understand that great things require a long time of being really, really excellent, persistent, and organized, you're going to have great things. Now, I talk about this a lot. Larry Page was being interviewed by Vinod Khosla, and he talked about Google. He said that one of their competitive advantages is their time horizon. I think I'm paraphrasing, but you can get less than you think accomplished in a quarter and way more than you think accomplished in 10 years. So if you have a long time horizon on your career, if you don't need to be, in the Hall of Fame by 9 months into your tenure at a job, you're going to have an advantage over the people that are impatient. The people that are impatient, that are jumping ship the minute that they don't get promoted to AE, the people that, had one good quarter and are crying about needing a raise or whatever it may be, those people are great people to compete with, because all you have to do is keep your head down and do an amazing job. And if all you do is tell yourself, I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame, but I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame when I'm in my mid-30s or early 40s as opposed to in my mid-20s, you're going to have a competitive advantage. So give yourself that competitive advantage and have a long-term perspective on your career. Now, this has been Sam's Corner. This has been the Sales Hacker Podcast. If you want to see show notes, see upcoming guests, play more episodes from our incredible lineup of sales leaders, visit saleshacker.com and head to the podcast tab. If you haven't given a feedback rating on the Sales Hacker Podcast, please do so. Please give us 5 stars. If you think that it sucks, then don't give us any feedback at all. But if you're a happy listener, give us 5 stars. Tell your friends. Go into the iTunes store and give us that feedback. If you want to reach out to me, you can on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, thanks to our sponsors for this episode, Conga, which is the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite, and Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. And you know what I'm going to say. I'll see you next time.